Meet the Lot, native token of Lukki Exchange and the most potential tool for investing this year. Trade now on P2B, B2B and Lukki.io.
I think had the big intro from Andreas earlier on stage, being called a morally bankrupt company, which actually I think reveals some of the sort of tensions around blockchain data, and was one of the big reasons, without prepping Andreas to say that, is why I wanted to actually speak today, because as in the last few months, I think I've seen the industry start to cast around for sources of high quality data to actually understand what's going on. We're past the phase of let's just go put money on the back of an ICO white paper, and instead the industry's trying to understand, look, is there a signal that we can invest in? How can we make good decisions? And blockchain data is a potential for that, but it's a misunderstood one, I think, as the intro from Andreas perhaps demonstrated. So why am I qualified really to talk about blockchain data? Well, Chainalysis provides compliance and investigation software for over 180 companies around the world. And if you want to understand the high bar for quality data, then you should go and try and serve law enforcement and regulators and exchanges and financial institutions. So they really make sure that we know what we're doing when we say this is some activity on the blockchain. And then my role as chief economist is to take a slightly sort of step back view of that data and really understand what's going on in the whole system. So I spend every day analyzing blockchain data, trying to understand what's going on. So 15 minutes is a very short amount of time to cover a very big topic. So I'm going to pack it all in. I am around all day if you want to ask questions, so do come up to me after. First of all, I'm going to run through what actually is blockchain data, briefly talk about why it's important, explain what it's good for, and then just provide some perhaps questions you should ask whenever you engage with blockchain data. So onto what blockchain data actually is. Well, this is blockchain data. This is the hex code of a transaction. It's pretty much what you'd see on a blockchain. It's not very useful or intelligible. I don't think there's anyone here who really knows what that means, at least off by heart. And that's why there are services like blockchain.info that provide block explorers that take that code and they parse it and give that more structure. So we can actually see that that transaction was one address sending about 0.02 Bitcoin to another address. And so this starts to tell us a bit more about what's going on the blockchain, but even still, we don't really know what's going on. So here is some context to that transaction. That actually was Al-Sadak, a terrorist organization, receiving a donation from a crowdfunding campaign that they did on the internet. You can see the blockchain address that they wanted people to send money to there. And this is perhaps a shocking example, but for me what it really demonstrates is that behind all that blockchain data, behind that hex code, there are real people doing real things. And it's only when we can actually understand that layer of it can we really understand what blockchain data actually is and what it's telling us. But of course, one of the nice things about being the chief economist at Chainalysis is I get to look at all the data, and I can tell you that while this is a risk, terrorist financing is still a minimal amount of the transaction on the blockchain. Actually, the large amount of it is to do with financial speculation. So just to give you an example of what that looks like on the blockchain, again, on the right side here, we have what we see in our software tool, and on the left, just a headline from about a month ago where the Bitcoin price fell by about $1,000 very rapidly, and people were saying, hang on, what happened? The theory was that there was a large sale of Bitcoin on Bitstamp, which drove the price down, and BitMEX, which gets its price index from Bitstamp and another exchange, had a price decline, and someone probably had a very highly leveraged short position on BitMEX. And actually on chain you can see from a small network of addresses there was a large flow into Bitstamp and also a position formed of BitMEX around that time. And so here blockchain data, once we put it into the context of this market event, starts to tell us a bit more about what's actually going on in the crypto economy. And so really understanding blockchain data, it does reveal an economy, but you've got to structure it, take it out of that hex code, and add some context, and then you can really understand what's going on. So, why is blockchain data important? So, I guess there's sort of two reasons. The first, for me, is that blockchain data is in some sense, the truth. And what I mean by that is every transaction that's on the blockchain has been put there intentionally. Someone incurred a cost to do that. They had to pay a fee of that transaction. So, all of us can go and check and verify that that transaction happened. I still put some, quotation marks around truth because we can debate, were these transactions in some sense meaningful? So for example, last year there were Bitcoin Cash stress tests where they just pushed loads of transactions through, and you can ask, what are those transactions actually doing? Are they, if you like, real economic activity? But at least we can have that debate. That's quite a long way from perhaps the debate around exchange volumes. Are they real? And indeed the promises in ICO white papers. So, in an industry that really, I think, has grappled to understand what's actually going on, blockchain data does give you, sort of an accurate record of, the industry. And then, for me, the second and perhaps most important reason about why blockchain data is important, and I think in some ways is, my counter-argument to Andreas's point, is cryptocurrencies are never going to get mainstream unless people know, what's going on. Even back in 2012, Brian Armstrong, a real visionary, he used blockchain data to justify why Coinbase should get invested in its seed round. Anyone today building, tools, writing dApps, probably really wants to understand, look, if I put this effort in, how many users might I have? What's my addressable market? And I think if you don't have blockchain data, you can't get anywhere close to answering that. There's the talk earlier was talking about the need for AML. Blockchain analytics can provide that, and I think actually de-risking some of that for all the financial institutions has allowed cryptocurrency to grow that next stage. I think that the next growth stage for cryptocurrency comes when people can actually go, okay, if I put my money into this, if I switch my career to this, if I invest in a business that's building on the I might get in a number of years. It's not a complete casino. And for me, blockchain data is the way that we answer that question that all those people will have. So very briefly on why it's important, but actually, what is blockchain data good for? How can we possibly use it to achieve anything? First of all, it is good for compliance and investigations. You can't really do anti-money laundering if you are a crypto business unless you have some blockchain analytics. What we've got here are just two examples from some research we did a little while ago where we analyzed some exchange hacks. So exchanges quite often get hacked for hundreds of millions of dollars worth in the last year. And we can actually see when that money gets hacked from an exchange, the paths that they go through to cash out. And we can actually identify that there were two major groups that were behind the majority of hacks. They're very large and sophisticated. They create these big nebulous webs, and we can actually, understand that, and we can then go tell other exchanges, look, there's a hack occurred here. We think those funds are coming towards you, so they can then take action to return the funds from the people from where it was stolen. So, blockchain data, it helps with compliance and investigations, and I think that has a pretty good use. But obviously, I'm the chief economist, so I don't spend all my time thinking about this. I think about what is the crypto economy. And so we can also use blockchain data to think about adoption and usage. So, for example, here is a chart which shows what we call the economic transaction value, the value actually sent between people every day on average in the last quarter of 2019 across the different cryptocurrencies. And you saw Brian's slide when he was pitching Coinbase back in 2012, and there was $2 million a day of transaction value on Bitcoin. It's now $1 billion. So we can actually say, look, the industry has really grown. We've got a quantifiable metric. Look, actually, Bitcoin really is dominating in terms of value transacted on chain. The sum of all the other cryptos perhaps equals Bitcoin, but people perhaps might not realize that Tether is actually the third biggest cryptocurrency in terms of value being transacted on the blockchain. So getting these types of insights by analyzing the data, I think helps everyone get a better sense of what's going on. Of course, we can dive a bit deeper. We can start looking at the disaggregated level of that data. We can understand who the major players are, perhaps regional flows. So for example, here was some data that we provided to DR recently, looking at the flows of Tether on chain. And we actually saw that a very large amount of that was driven by Chinese exchanges. And that was somewhat counter to the narrative that's in crypto at the moment, which is that actually it's US exchanges that dominate all the activity. Here we were able to look at on-chain data and get a new perspective on the industry. And that's kind of amazing because crypto's big, it's global, it's hard to get these high-level insights, but actually it's all there on the blockchain if you know how to analyze it. We can also start to explore the relationship between on-chain flows and exchange volumes and prices. We had some work that we presented at Consensus recently where we looked at the Ethereum whales, very large holders, and we did some statistical analysis which showed that the Ethereum price is actually largely driven by the Bitcoin price, but when ETH whales send to exchanges, that actually drives some intraday volatility. So again, looking at blockchain data to try and explain, what's happening, sense in the exchange world has been kind of interesting, and actually it tells us, hey, if you're trading volatility, then look at whales. But if you're thinking about a long-term price formation, actually you should be thinking about other things. So that was a whistle-stop tour of how we can use blockchain data, but I wanted to end with some issues to look out for because it's a complex area. I think the first is, for as much as Andreas sort of says that we're able to kind of see everything, it's actually kind of hard. There's a lot of hard work in understanding the addresses that belong to a service, so we don't focus on individuals or personally identifiable information. Instead we're trying to understand which are the addresses that Binance holds or Wall Street Market holds. When you do that, it requires an awful lot of ground truth. It requires a sort of very scientific approach to try and see if I actually said this address belonged to this service, how can I know when I'm wrong about that? And that's a really slightly geeky technical part, but there's a lot of people who say, let's go use some machine learning to cluster addresses on the blockchain. Well, they've got to really understand how they might be getting that wrong, and therefore the errors they might make in any inference. So it's a slow and steady technical job to actually build this. And related to that is there's this concept of change of hands. When has crypto actually, when have I sent crypto from myself to someone in the audience? Identifying that on the blockchain is really hard. We spend a lot of time trying to get that right, and if we don't know, we don't suggest that there is a change of hands, and that's because, certainly from the compliance perspective, you need to know, was someone holding this crypto or was someone else when they took part in some illicit activity? But even if you're doing more economic analysis, you actually need to know, has this changed counterparties? So for example, if you're looking at an exchange, and you think that there's a big movement, actually just the exchange shuffling around its own internal funds, you've then got the wrong signal and you might have made a trade that you would later regret. So understanding these complexities is really important to sort of accurate analysis. As the sort of other thing to think about with blockchain data, people on the blockchain sort of do weird things. They code software bugs into their wallet software by accident. They just decide to experiment. That makes it very hard to interpret what's going on. And also blockchains do weird things, like fork. So for example, in Ethereum, after the fork there, essentially all Ether went through a smart contract called replay safe split. And if you didn't really know that history and know that detail, you would suddenly see all the value going through this one smart contract, and you would be very confused about what's going on. It would be hard to interpret. And then the very final thing on blockchain data is when analyzing it, you really need to think that correlation doesn't equal causation. I think the industry has gone through the sort of phase of going, okay, we have no data, we've got some data, let's make correlations. And the next stage for me is actually, let's see if we can get some statistical causations and actually make some kind of testable predictions. So yeah, that's a kind of whistle-stop tour for blockchain data. Thanks for listening. Feel free to email or come and talk to me afterwards.